I think one of the interesting aspects coming out of this discussion is this notion of open access to information and how that's managed. And perhaps it means, Dave, perhaps it means the end of the rockstar scientist and the start of the rockstar scientific team or the rockstar industry scientific team. Is that a way to sum up how some of these, and Ros and Dennis certainly join in, is that a big change in thinking that you think is needed to advance some of these issues?
I loved, this isn't on. I loved Dennis's description about the importance of team, because really to make this work you've got to have, you've got to have engineers, you've got to have data analysts, you've got to have domain experts, you've got to bring all of these people together, and it's incredibly hard to do. It's really a huge communication thing, and I was laughing when you were speaking, Dennis, because in our first iteration of our Oyster app, we lost $48,000 because a hardware engineer understood the word system responsibility differently to a software engineer. And I think it's a really important issue, and I think what digital technology does is allow feedback loops and let people become scientists, and I think that's a new relationship between the traditional concept of research. It's really a democratisation of research, which I think is really exciting.
I was just going to add, Ros, I find it very interesting working across disciplines where we have ag domain people and, say, data analysts, machine learning type people or whatever. And it's really interesting to listen to the machine learning or the data people. They really challenge the domain people about what is the issue that you're really trying to get at the heart at. And that's a really valuable learning for I think, scientists in particular who have been embedded in their sort of area for a long time. It really challenges them to think, what is it that you want to get out of the data? So it's a real two-way benefit from working across these teams.
I would just add, I really liked Roz's emphasis on the incentive to share. And for different enterprises, whether it's beef, dairy, cropping, whatever, those incentives are probably different. But it's that incentive to share which will cause it to happen. But until it happens, we are limited. We have a bound. If we only connect on the farm, there's a certain limit that we will be able to reach. Once we do share, we can go farther. But of course, the incentive has to be there. So I think, and that's, I'm an engineer, so don't ask me to think about that. We need some social scientists and others, the economists, to essentially drive, well, these are the models that would bring about the implementation, essentially.
That's what I am.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, in the middle.
Kathy Evans from the Tasmanian Institute of Agriculture. Thank you all for wonderful presentations. I'd like to pick up on the idea of context and common terminology. And Dave, I guess... All right, did everyone not hear that?
That's all right, you're right.
I'm talking about context and common terminology. Importantly, perhaps, Dave, I'm picking up on the natural language processing, and really how can... I still are a long way to go from that to understand the context, and also this idea that we have a lot of... we can't codify everything. There's a thing called tacit knowledge, which is really the stuff that's up in our brains that we can't codify. So I'm just wondering, if there are a lot of opportunities here, but how can we address those particular things around context and in teams, common terminology?
You start.
Okay. Thanks, Kathy. Look, it's really, really incredibly important, and I can give you another very practical example. We're involved in a research project in a former life where we were trying to predict salinity. And the problem was that we were using, the sensors that weren't accurate. That was a discovery later. But we were also polling every 15 minutes in a 24-hour cycle. Now, of course, tides work on a diurnal cycle, which is 24 hours and 50 minutes. So if you don't poll every 10 minutes, you'll never see the pattern. And once we got the domain science right, we cracked that problem in about 6 weeks with accurate data. a problem that had taken us years where we couldn't actually see it before. Context is everything, and domain knowledge is everything. The second thing I'd say is we see ourselves as creating technology to help growers be the expert. It's not to, it's decision support, not expert systems that are taking them out of the equation. And I think that's a really big problem and a bit of a challenge for scientists, to be frank, because scientists often, they want the perfect model. It's got to all work and you've got to be able to spit it in and spit it out the other end and it's exactly right. Honestly, most people just want better than what they've got now. And so really I think we need to rethink about that, and this is part of this idea of agile science. If you can give people value right now, again, I really liked what Dennis said about this, and then actually get the data and build models and over time improve it, but allow feedback loops from growers and agronomists and people who are already the knowledge networks into the community, you're going to go a lot faster. And I think it's a much healthier relationship between researchers and the community to do that, but it's a challenge because a lot of researchers do this and they really don't want to release things that's not right from very good reasoning. But it does mean that the process of science is slower and a little bit kind of elitist.
Dennis or Dave?
Just a thought about this common terminology thing. I'm just kind of curious, based on the audience, who would consider themselves a coder or a hacker here? Anyway, a few of you, great. And it's good to have you here because my observation is that the culture among that group is very different than the culture of a traditional agricultural scientist or engineering. And because of that culture difference, it's good to be together. Being in an educational institution, I think we've got to rethink, in order to address the terminology thing, we've got to rethink how does lifelong learning happen? And in that culture of the coders and the hackers, they have a way of doing that. You don't learn how to program, you learn how to program. But still in the traditional ag sciences, and ag engineering as an example, we teach that as a subject matter, not necessarily how to learn that better. So I think there is going to be a new role to bring about context to different people and to improve the common terminology. You know, the use of, at academic institutions, minors, post-baccalaureate certificates, continuing education programs, however they are, they need to be more broad in their delivery so that the people from the other discipline find it and pick up on it, whatever it is. The other thing, you know, they have a core competency, but they need terminology from the other. I think that's going to help.
And if ag workers are going to be knowledge workers of the future, I think we have to change the nature of the education process. I really agree with that. And yeah, I think that's a real challenge because you almost need, and I know, Mike, this is something that you've been working on with the Food Agility Group, is how do we look at education that for food and agricultural industry that's combining business skills with agronomy skills with digital skills, and you really need those things together, not in the old-fashioned way of you do a module from each different, you know, faculty, but you have an integrated learning program that is actually based on a transdisciplinary approach.
How are we going? Is there a question there?
Thanks for that. I'm Darren Lee. I'm actually a grain grower from Western Australia. Actually sit on the Western panel of GRDC as well. The three speakers this morning have all focused on cloud applications. Given I'm rural and remote, our upload speed is crap. Our download speed is even worse. And I really think cloud is not the answer for us being rural and remote. I'll just ask the question, what work have you seen done with growers having their own servers and mobile servers on farm, which we can actually put through a network of antennas and stuff, which gives us quicker uploads and download speeds as against this cloud information. But it also gives us the right to hold our IP within the farm, and then we can actually network with people as experts in the industry of the information that I want to transpose from my farm to allow have access to my server. And that also gives me security of my information, as against sending it off to the cloud, that the only cloud I want to see that's going to deliver a fair bit of rain over our place.
Look, really, really great question, and actually this is one of the very exciting things about the Internet of Things and edge computing. And so in the microclimate sensing system I explained that we're working with Bosch to develop, we actually do compute at the edge. And some things, honestly, you don't want to go to the cloud because A, connectivity is bad, and B, it's actually too slow. Particularly if you're dealing with really critical things like frost, for example, where you really need instantaneous decisions if you're going to take mitigation action, it's actually a bit of a hindrance. And it's also very expensive, and some things just don't need to go to the cloud. For example, soil temperature doesn't change very much, so why the hell would you beam it up? And so what edge computing allows you to do is actually set parameters on the edge in your computer on the farm to say what do you want it to go up and what you don't. Now, I take your point about wanting to control data, and in our business model, our customers do. They actually own the data. They can take it out at any time. But I'd challenge you about whether it's really that secure. In my experience, it's much better to have your systems backed up somewhere, and it's rare that people, anyone, myself included, is good enough to constantly make sure their data is, is updated and put into backup so that you've got really guaranteed storage. So I think it's worth thinking about that issue, but I think you've got to give people the right to do that if they want to.
Darren, I'd like to comment on that because I tried to touch on some of a use case where it was just local connectivity. I think if you look at a sector like dairy where you see quite a bit of uptake of activity monitors on individual livestock, to measure, it might be estrus detection or lameness, where it's just a local connectivity and there's a value proposition there where information is transmitted from individual animals back to the dairy shed, could be integrated with milk meter information and so on. It's quite a data-rich type of environment, and I think there's actually some use cases out there, and I'd be interested in hear a specific issue for you, perhaps, about what is it that you would do with that information? Because I think that's the key, because that might not require any broader connectivity. You might be able to do it locally. And there's certainly technologies out there with different data rates and different ability to do edge computing, analytics at the edge, which is really just doing processing at the point of data capture. So there's the technologies out there, but is there a value proposition for actually investing in that system for you? And that's I think, the interesting question.
Dennis, perfect connectivity in the US?
We have zones where connectivity may not be quite that bad, but there are lots of areas that just don't have access. But in those cases, you can, for example, on the machinery, instrument locally and essentially cache it until you get back to the homestead and offload. So as you're unloading grain, you're unloading data. So I think that is a solution at times, even connecting on the farm, if it's a large area, maybe it just doesn't make sense, but you can still cache and serve later.
Certainly, and that issue is the topic of one of the sessions tomorrow when a few of our telco providers will be here and a farmer who's got his own solution to getting around that problem.